I'll start the question, and I'll go in the order of ABC. So I will start with you, Alok.
All right. There are
Uh,
some disadvantages of names with A clearly. So,
oh, we got it from our school days. So the question to you is, what is that one quality that will keep startup founders and their businesses going during time of crisis?
so I'm actually going to use two qualities, and they'll be slightly contradictory. So the one is that I think in some ways it is time to be a little bit paranoid.
Okay.
At least I am of the belief that this is actually not a normal crisis. With whatever data actually we want to say, look, I think no matter what Moody's is saying or anybody else is saying, I think this year the economic contraction for India will be somewhere between 5 to 10% negative.
Yeah.
So it is actually desperate times. Even if you go back to the Great Depression, the economy in the US contracted by 25% over a 4-year period, which is roughly 6% per year. So I think we are in that sense seeing a very deep crisis. That being said, while your job is to be paranoid, I think it is equally one's job to be calm and thoughtful. I think we can all be very knee-jerk in our reactions. We have to think about whether this crisis is an opportunity or this crisis is a headwind. And above all, I think that we need to be decisive in these situations. I think the weak-hearted way, let me do a little bit this, little bit that, this might also happen, and this might also happen, and this might also happen. I think being everywhere basically means that you will be nowhere. So I think it is time to be decisive in general. My bias though, and this is a bias as opposed to a quality, is that the one thing that will matter the most for founders is the focus on cash and being around by the time the sun comes out, which may be 18 months, which may be 24 months from now.
Oh, you are saying that it could be 18 to 24 months.
Yeah. Actually, sorry, I'm speaking out of turn, but Shraddha, if I may add,
yeah,
go back to the 2008 crisis. I used to be a sales guy at that point. And in Q3 of 2008 calendar, I had my best quarter as a sales guy. And I used to be with SAP India. And we, as SAP, had our best quarter, I think ever, as far as I remember. If I look at the number of quarters it took to come back to where we left from that quarter, I think it took at least 10 quarters before we were back to the same level where we left it off. Now, it's your sort of own guesswork to believe whether we are in a deeper crisis or we are in a lighter crisis. I don't know. But for those of us who are pessimists, on this front at least, I would say that this could at least take a 2-year period.
Priyank, over to you. Like B2C, some B2B segments are thriving while others are floundering. What kind of shifts have you seen in this segment, in the B2B segment?
So B2B segment for us is twofold. So one is SaaS, and the other one is B2B India, B2B marketplaces and manufacturing. And interestingly enough, SaaS is actually positively impacted in a lot of scenarios. So what I'm starting to see is across our SaaS portfolios, depends. I mean, it really depends. So there are vertical SaaS companies, which might be impacted because they're supporting a particular SaaS business. So they got a particular retail business or offline businesses, and they are impacted obviously. But horizontal SaaS, you need security, you need contract management, you need sales intelligence. All those are actually positively impacted and tend to be doing quite well. So there, yes, we actually, just like Alok said, we followed a plan. We made up, hey, this is our pessimistic plan, base plan. So we did multiple scenarios. And at least in SaaS companies, I'm seeing they are doing actually better than the base plan. So they're not super optimistic plan or pessimistic, but they're actually doing better than the base plan. And I think that's simply a secular shift that everything is getting digitized. And since everyone is working remotely, all companies have realized that they definitely need to have more and more digital tools available. So some of the companies which were doing, I would say, 2-3 demos in a week are now doing 6-7 demos in a week. So they're able to move there, and hopefully it will lead to some sales as well. Having said that, there are also pockets within that SaaS space where they are seeing negative impacts also. And I think that's where it becomes slightly tricky as to though a majority of the portfolio is seeing positive. I think those companies which are selling to smaller businesses, SMB SaaS, they are negatively impacted because buyers are postponing their decisions, or if the pricing was tied to number of users, they're seeing that companies are downsizing and they had to let go of users, so the revenues are coming down. Or collections, in terms of collections, people are asking for special deals, saying we can't pay so much, can you postpone our billing cycles? So that is also happening. So it's a mix, I think, but companies which are well positioned. So for example, companies from India, and so I'm assuming the audience is majorly from India, companies from India which had pricing power advantage on SaaS tools compared to US SaaS tools, they are trying to spend a lot more money and going on the offensive against US companies and saying, hey, why are you spending something like $50,000 on this tool when I can get it you for $15,000? And they are seeing growth momentum as well. So I think goes back to what is your core strength and can you play on it while being prudent, maintaining a balance sheet. On the B2B marketplaces side, and we have a very large portfolio at Accel, I think what I'm seeing is the credit cycles are getting elongated, right? So it's not just the mid-market guys who are paying. In B2B marketplaces, you always have a working capital challenge of 60 days. So companies who already were affected by a 60-day cycle are now seeing 90-day cycles, and sometimes you will see that their recoveries or dues are getting bigger and bigger, and larger customers will give excuses like, hey, our finance guys are not in office, we have to sign it by hand, and all of those kind of issues. So that is a worrisome feature. Though some people have also transformed their businesses. So we are seeing some businesses basically realizing, hey, can we do supply chain? So I'll give you an example. So I have a company called Bizongo. So they used to do plastics and packaging, basically packaging business. And during this time, they essentially realized that they can do a lot of PPE business as well. So they actually did not see revenues dip at all during the COVID timeframe, and interestingly they were able to help the country as well. So I think business reinvention was also, but they realized this is what we do. We are a supply chain expert, and what we can do is we can take that expertise and apply it to another vertical and just start off the entire business because there's a big need for it. But yes, businesses which are again in logistics, businesses which were again in let's say shipping or trade, I think those are significantly impacted for sure.
So one quick question before I go to Ritwik is, Priyank, when you said that some companies you are seeing are doing well in the in the B2B space, I just wanted to understand that their customers are India based or their customers are outside India, the ones you see are doing well.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think the answer gave was for international customers, US based customers. And they are doing well because the customers tell them, yes, what the product which you are selling is, it was important for us, but it was not urgent for us. And now we are sitting at home, we have time to fix our processes, we are fixing our products, workflows, and so we have time to listen to you and sell what you're selling.
Okay, interesting. Thank you so much. Thanks, Priyank. Ritwik, you have been working in the product space. You've been, you understand this space very well. Tell us what are some of the shifts which entrepreneurs businesses, product shifts which entrepreneurs businesses will have to make now, some reversible, some irreversible shifts that they will have to make now.
So Shraddha, let me twist the question a little bit. From instead of products, let me first define what a product is, and then I'll kind of give my answer. So there are two kinds of products, especially the kind of stuff that we invest in. Even though everything is digital, everything looks internet software, but there are some products which are purely digital in nature. Social products usually come in that category, or pure content products come in that category. But predominantly everything else has some component of offline or a process or a touch point with something else which is behind the scenes. And what this current crisis has exposed is that pretty much every company or every product company will have to rethink and redefine their processes which run behind those products. So consumers may want to experience a product the way they used to do it previously, but they cannot do it today because, say, you were dependent on a logistics network, and that logistics network is not operating the same way that you were doing. You were dependent on aggregating a certain bunch of local businesses out there. Many of those local businesses are shut or going out of business out there. So a lot of those different processes are going to change. And that is where the resiliency of how you design your product, the resiliency of how you're building it, resiliency of what exactly goes in order to fulfill the customer comes into the play. And that, I think, is going to be the single biggest irreversible change, I would say, that will come that has come across. Today, when I speak to our founders, everybody has started thinking of not only changing the processes to becoming more resilient, but want to change it in a manner that for the next 2 years, next 3 years, they can weather the storm, they can ride through anything that is out there. And if that happens for the next 2 years, that means this is a permanent shift in terms of how people are going to think of their products, how they're going to think of designing, what goes on behind the scene. Because, in reality, what a customer sees is only 5% of what the product is. 95% of the stuff happens always behind the scenes. And that is where bulk of the impact is. Your employees who are building the product are remote. Your interdependencies are completely beyond your control. So how do you manage all of that is, I think, the single biggest question. We don't have all the answers right now. Some people are trying to figure it out. Some companies like BigBasket, etc., have moved rapidly and hacked their way literally to get the processes right behind the product. But many other companies are still grappling with it and will build permanent solutions which are far more resilient going forward.
Okay. Yeah. Alok, you have seen the 2000.com bust, if I may say so, 2008 crisis, and you, along with Ritesh and Rahul, founded Stellaris in 2016, which was also a little slow for the startup ecosystem, if I may say so. I want to understand, and this is for all the entrepreneurs, all the businesses, what are some of the themes? What are some of the common themes that you saw in people who lived the crisis and actually survived?
Very good question, Shraddha, and I keep asking myself this question also. And if I go back to my own experience, 2000 crisis was really bad for me personally.
Yeah.
And the firm I worked for actually shut down. So I came out sort of in the failure mode, if I may say, in the 2000-2001 timeframe, at which point I used to work in the Silicon Valley at that point. 2008 was different. I was working for a large company. I don't think there was ever an issue of survival. But again, public markets are still there to be satisfied with every day. But I thought we handled 2008 actually far differently. If at least I have to pick one theme out of these situations, see, I feel that as an entrepreneur, you always are faced with two choices in any crisis. Number one, one more background to it. You don't know how deep the crisis will be. See, we all try to put a predictor hat on our head, but the reality is we don't have too much information. In fact, if you think about it right now, is there going to be a vaccine in 12 months or no? Is there going to be a cure? We don't know. Are we going to get immunity from this? We don't know. Is there going to be a second wave and a third wave? We don't know. What's going to be the fatality rate? We don't know. The reality is that the number of variables is so high that even though we all try to predict, the reality is we have no capability to do so. Yeah. So now that we are faced with uncertainty where we actually genuinely can't predict, what do we do? So you have two choices. Choice one is to play on the front foot and say that, look, life is not going to turn out to be as bad as everybody's making out to be. And when the sun shines, I want to be sort of swinging my bat strongly at that point in time. And therefore you say that, look, no point being very conservative. I'll play for that. Because I don't want to be caught in a cautious mode when, let's say, by July, things turn back to normal. There is a second scenario, which is that life may turn out to be really bad. Who knows? This may stretch to 18 months, 24 months, etc. And what if I play aggressively, but I run out of capital during this period? In which case, I have a survival risk. And at least I would argue that between the two situations, you're actually better off playing for the scenario where you say that, look, if it turns out to be worse than I thought, then you're prepared for it. If it turns out to be better than what you thought, you may lose 3 months of growth, granted. You may have to hire back people that you may have let go,
Hmm.
but at least you do survive. And especially when I think predictability is very difficult, one has to do that. At least, again, going back to my experience, Shraddha, on this thing, in 2001, 2002, we probably made 10 to 15 incremental cuts in the company I was part of.
Hmm.
And eventually on 31st December 2002, we shut down our shop. And I was the last employee to leave, unfortunately, in that place. In 2008, as I said, survival was not the issue. The public markets were watching us. We took one deep cut and we took it very rapidly. And we never had to do that cut again. We lasted the whole cycle with it. You create the bad news only once, because it's not just about the external crisis. It's also about the morale within your organization that begins to play a role.
Yes.
Once you enter a vicious cycle, even within your own company, actually you find that you are losing the talent that you never wanted to lose, for example. You're losing customers that you never wanted to lose. And when those kinds of cycles begin to set in, it's actually a pretty vicious cycle. So I would say in this situation, actually overreacting and reacting once is probably better than being very incremental and taking multiple guesses in trying to reach that point, at least would be my take.
How severe is the impact, like on the early stage companies?
Yeah, I mean, this is the first time I have seen companies go from 30 million in revenue to zero. Like zero. Like the board meeting starts. So, I mean, my past experiences with crises was like I was at Adobe, and what we did was I used to carry a $4 million quota, and then suddenly that quota was changed to $15 million because he said, yeah, all the new stuff which you are doing, it has to stop. So just focus on stuff which we know has been selling. Stop all the new stuff, right? But yes, I mean, coming back to a answer, so a question, I think the revenues have come to zero. I think that is like, no board member can, and then, the founder is in this, all founders and all board members are afraid, what is going to happen and how soon will it come back. And in the first, when the first lockdown was announced, I think all of us were optimistic. And founders tend to be a lot more optimistic, obviously, than board members. The founders by May everything will be back, and we project that we will only lose 1 month of revenue. And I was telling them, hey, plan for 6 months. And so some of our companies, so it's all not dire, right? So some of our companies have now come back to 30% of the revenues they were in March, for example. And we are hoping that they will come back to 50% by July. So the big worry obviously is if by Diwali timeframe, if the demand does not come back up in consumer companies specifically, then we can see a significant issue across the economy, and not just us. And it's not the small companies, everything, even the large companies are impacted.
Yeah.
I don't think, so yes, I think there are companies, so I look at my portfolio in this way. There are companies which have money. So I tell them, you have money for next 2 years, you have money for more than 1 year, 18 months, just go out and bat strongly, build products so that you can, like Alok said, when things come back, you are at the front and you can, compete against your competitors. There are companies which have no money, right? So we know that, unfortunately they are, and the founders have taken a lot of hard calls. The entire team has taken 50-60% salary cuts. The founders, some of the founders are taking zero salaries, and they're trying to elongate the runway as much as possible to get to a conclusion someday. Either they survive through the crisis, it comes back, or they are able to sell the company, or they just shut down. Right? That's the other. The problem childs are the ones which are neither here nor there. So they have not exactly 12 months of runway, but they have more than 6 months of runway, between 6 to 12 months. So there it's a tricky situation, so there, and they are not also very, they were going in for a fundraise and, they are stuck. What to do now? They were hoping that 6 months mein paisa aa jayega, right? So there we are trying to support them in various different ways, trying to talk to, venture debt funds, see if every penny counts, see if they can get their money back from customers as soon as possible, from venture debt guys as much as possible money they can get, any grants, SIDBI has come up with a system. So all those kind of, all options are there. We have a battery of tests we are trying to do.
Ritvik, we want to hear tell us some product startups who you see are growing, because we are also, like, for example, I just wanted to just tell all of you is that, I just spoke to Unacademy, and they said that they are really seeing a growth in their numbers, and they are seeing a huge growth in their, but also he said that he has a runway for 3 years. He has capital saved, around 240 million in his bank, but that's a very different story. But Ritvik, what are some of the companies, product startups you see are actually doing well right now?
Yeah. So from the doom and gloom scenario of Priyank, let's turn positive.
And he's looking also like Devdas.
जब तक मेरी कंपनी सारा पैसा नहीं रेज करेगी तब तक दाढ़ी बढ़ती रहेगी.
So yes.
Hot shot investor you are. Anyway.
So there are companies which are actually thriving, and of course the best example is Zoom, where all of us are today logged in, and I can see there are almost 250 participants today logged in and doing this. So this is an example of a company which is enabling remote, operating completely in a remote fashion, in terms of providing an opportunity for people to engage with other human beings socially while we are all maintaining social distance, and it's kind of growing rapidly. So this is one example of it. Now, of course, beyond that, there are many other companies, including within our portfolio, which are actually growing. Some of the obvious ones are like you mentioned, Unacademy, which is an education tech company. That is, most edtech companies are today growing rapidly, and which I believe some of the changes that they're going to bring is irreversible to the education industry, not only in India, but globally. Remote healthcare companies, companies which are providing any kind of service which is purely remote. Actually, so if I were to bucket it, right, edtech, healthcare, or any of these are all providing a service which is remote in nature, and those companies are growing. And the demand for them, the need for them, ability to deliver information in a contactless, remote fashion, these companies are thriving actually. Like within our company, a portfolio, there are companies which is selling games and toys for kids in US markets. There's a company called PlayShift, growing by 4x, 5x, just because in India, e-commerce was not allowed, but the rest of the world, e-commerce was allowed. And kids are stuck at home. They need something to entertain themselves. They need something to play with. Growing rapidly. Insurance companies saw a big surge out there. But a common thread across all of them that all these companies were purely digital in nature. They did not have to rely heavily on logistics or heavily on any kind of physical infrastructure out there. So companies which allowed people to do stuff from home, allowed people to connect with their peers and friends at home, allowed people to take care of themselves, be it healthcare or insurance, all of them grew. But what I'm more interested in is that these are the ones which grew in the last 2-3 months. We're going to see a wave of companies which will appear in the next 6 months, which are going to emerge out of the crisis and are actually going to grow. And this is talking about some of the behavioral shifts that I spoke about. Most companies are going remote, for example. Work the way we used to do today is no longer happening. Travel, I don't think travel is going to resume anytime soon, which means there's going to be a new set of companies which is going to enable people to connect with the rest of the world be it for sales, be it for business meetings, whatever, in a remote manner, be it security for your work from home employees, be it collaborative tools for people to do things. All of those things will have a fundamental shift. New companies will emerge and those products will grow. And that is what I'm more interested in rather than what has exactly happened in the last 2-3 months. So I'm eagerly looking forward to many of these smart entrepreneurs who are going to see an opportunity here and actually build some of these products. And those products will grow out there.
Ritvik, I have to ask you, so you're going on record to say that you will be continue to investing right now, right?
Yes, we will continue.
Like now.
Right now. Right now. In fact, we closed an investment just 2 weeks ago, and we are in the middle of closing one more also. So yes, we are active and we are open for business.
Yeah. Thanks, because I'm going to put I'll ask all of you, because the grapevine between us as entrepreneurs and everyone is that abhi to investors conservative ho jayenge aur abhi invest nahi karenge, abhi darenge. So
I think it's a great time to invest. Like I was thinking, smart people who really want the 2015 time frame when McKinsey consultants start coming to pitch to you, and I can make a big company. Nothing wrong with McKinsey consultants, but they are not passionate about the idea. They are passionate about They think that they can get funding because everybody is getting funding, so they will build it. But right now, people who are seriously thinking about building a good product, who can't sit in their houses thinking, "Yaar, मैं कैसे, like I can't live if I don't build this product." Those guys are building products, and actually, that's a great time to invest in those, back those founders up.
Yeah.
Right? So,
And see, we invest with a 7-year, 8-year, 9-year horizon. Most of the companies we invest in, we stay invested for 7, 8, 9, sometimes even 10 years. So if we put that time horizon, nothing should fundamentally shift, right? Provided, of course, these companies can weather the storm of the current storm and crisis and go through it, they should, in theory, be fine. And if nothing recovers in the next 7, 8 years, then all of us are doomed in any case.
Yeah. Alok, to you, and I'm going to take example of mobility, but it's also symptomatic of, maybe companies in the travel, like companies which are offline to a large extent, right? So Stellaris has invested in logistics startup Loadshare and the mobility startup Vogo. And we all know that mobility and logistics has been most severely impacted during this lockdown. I just want to understand, and this is for everyone who will be watching and everyone who's thinking of building and doing things in the mobility space, what are the learnings that companies like Loadshare take from this that will help them bounce back and stronger in post-COVID world? Is there something that they're getting to learn right now?
So, Shraddha, there are some differences, some similarities even across the two sectors that you're talking of. And in many cases, sometimes the devil lies in the detail, because the specific business models are very different. But to begin with, the point that Ritwik made, that a large part of the products of such companies is actually physical, right? And therefore, during the period of lockdown, these companies have been severely impacted. There is no question whatsoever. I mean, if you put a curfew across the country, nothing can move. That means these companies will get impacted. But for a minute, if we don't take a 2 to 3 month view and take a slightly longer term view, I would say there are different dynamics actually in each of these spaces as well. So let's take logistics to begin with. Now, in case of Loadshare, they are very fortunate that they just raised capital first of all. And again, to be honest, that was not a strategy. It just happened to be. And I think that has served them well. But if you think about logistics, it's not as if logistics in the country will stop functioning. Beyond the lockdown, at least I'm a believer, Shraddha, that India cannot be in lockdown forever. We don't even have a choice, even if we wanted to be.
Yeah.
I think just probably an order of magnitude more people are going to die of hunger if the lockdown is not open soon.
Yes.
So we did what we did because we had to. We had to get prepared from a healthcare perspective, but the lockdown will actually get over. So in case of Loadshare, for example, I think Priyank was taking some examples on the percentage reduction. April was actually bad because you needed permits for everything. And getting permits was actually very hard. So in case of Loadshare or logistics at large, we are finding that demand is not an issue. Actually, there's plenty of demand. Even the offline shops that are open, they need supply chains to work. The initial shock is actually on the supply side for them. Are there enough vehicles? Are there enough drivers? Do they have permits? Etc. All those things. But we are finding that there was a significant difference even between April to May. And we are expecting a fairly sizable difference even between May and June. And I can be blamed for speaking too soon, clearly. And I may have to chew my words in 45 days from now. But actually, I believe that in logistics, July will already be back at the pre-COVID time.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's because logistics is actually an essential in the country that cannot be stopped. And we are already seeing enough signs of that happening. In fact, what is also happening is that because bulk of the country is actually served through the unorganized players, where there is less reliability, we are finding a shift to safety to the more organized players. So people like Loadshare and their equivalents in the market, they're actually gaining from this situation as opposed to losing, barring those months like April and May, clearly. Right? Mobility is a much trickier question because in many ways you could argue there's a demand issue. If many people like us are not even going to office, then what happens to the demand itself?
Yeah.
But there is a flip side to it also, in the sense that if you were to do a 2x2 matrix on affordability and safety, which means what kind of physical proximity do you have to other passengers, if you look at players like Vogo, there I would argue that once people do need to begin to travel, compared to a solution like a public bus, compared to a solution like metro, compared to even a shared auto or any of those solutions, ultimately a self-drive scooter is actually a far safer way to travel than many other forms of travel that will exist.
Yeah.
What we are waiting to see, and we don't have the full answer, Shraddha, is what kind of demand are we going to see still? And the world is just beginning to open, so we have just literally 1 week of data at this point in time, and we'll get more data in the next few weeks. But we're actually far more optimistic on that form of transport than we would be, for example, to a shared form of transport, where in the same form factor you have 3 or 4 people in the same vehicle. So we are actually not as bearish, I would argue, as actually most people are about that category. And I'm not trying to be defensive about a company we have invested in. I'm just trying to be genuine. So
no, I understand that, because I just want to say here that I was speaking to some counterparts and people in China last week, and I just getting a sense, because the lockdown, they don't have lockdown and they're back to this thing. So what was very interesting is that, and of course China does it at scale, is that they said that in some of the companies people are buying their own vehicles now, and two-wheelers and all those in the smaller towns are working, and actually and I might be wrong, but they said for the shared cabs and all, there's a huge downward in the consumption. But then again, it's a very early days in China, but that's like the data from there coming. Priyank, Axel, for most of us is also very ubiquitous with Flipkart investment, because you guys were one of the first people who invested, not one of the first people who invested in Flipkart, and you have been very, the champions of e-commerce story in India. Tell us, what do you see will be some of the changes in e-commerce post COVID?
I think the big thing is e-commerce is a positive fillip. Everybody is now ordering online. Right? So you don't want to go down to the shop, closest shop at all. So across all e-commerce companies, we are starting to see actually massive online orders happening. Even for example, Bluestone, you would expect that a jewelry, online jewelry business would not see too much business during this time, but they actually have a truckload of orders, because customers who had planned for buying jewelry for anniversaries, for gifts, for festivals, all of them, you can't buy anywhere else. So all the offline retailers have been caught off guard, right? So they now all of that consumption is going to shift to online. Yes, a lot of it might not stick around, but even if 30-40% of it sticks around, you will have doubling of the e-commerce penetration in India. So it's a tide which will rise all boats, not just Flipkart, for example, right? So that is point one. I think point two is some of the stronger players are going to become stronger. And the example I gave is like in 2015. I know it was not a crisis at such epic proportions, but for example, home services, at that time there were some 15-20 startups which were providing this beauty at home, plumbers at home, electricians at home. And when the sudden drying up of capital happened, there were only 2 companies which survived, Urban Clap and Housejoy. And then I think post that, whoever has the better product offering and the adoption of that particular consumer service just keeps on building up. And, in consumer, if the product is good, then it's very difficult to break the consumer loyalty from that particular startup. Right? So that's the second thing which is going to happen. E-commerce platforms which have good offerings, which have and good service levels, they will continue to have gained customer trust in this form. Though specific to grocery e-commerce, I think Reliance Jio Mart, I think that's a tricky one, right? That's a completely new paradigm shift which we are going to see, I think, in the next 4 to 5 years. Now, but keeping that aside, I think vertical e-commerce, like the discretionary spends, I think we will see some pushing back, because people will get into conservation mode of saving. So people are not going to buy. I don't think people are going to buy new furniture in the short term. I don't think people are going to buy new electronics in the short term. When you have unsurety of when you're unsure of whether you'll have your paycheck or not, people are not going to do all of those things. So that is definitely going to change a lot of things. But some things like, for example, I think pharma delivery, which was still whether it's easier to walk down to the store or not, and I think those kind of e-commerce verticals will get a fillip. They will continue to grow stronger and stronger. We are already seeing people like, even in China, people will not probably visit restaurants. So I'm assuming food delivery and the similar service industries will get a lot of growth.
Priyank, a quick idea. If one has to start something in e-commerce right now, so many questions. What should one start? Like, what is the segment where you all will invest also?
I think, okay, so see what is happening, right? So you are now living inside the house mode. You're living with your parents, you're living with your kids. And I don't know about you guys, but, doing work along with kids is not easy, right? If somebody can, I'm trying to find products which can keep my kids busy without me, I'm getting sad that, okay, I'm giving my son an iPad to play with or video games to play around with, right? And we are Unacademy and Vedantu and other similar online education startups which are engaging for kids. And work from home is going to increase, right? So if work from home is going to increase, kids are going to be at home. How can you provide services so the kids are happy? I think that's interesting. It's very difficult to keep parents at home. They just get bored. Like, how do you make sure that they are satisfied, right? So, and parents have started to use Zoom, but is there an easier way for them to build their own networks? And these kind of things just throw up new interesting problems. I know this is not exactly the question. I think the product e-commerce bit is very hard to answer though. I think it's not about, the product is product, but how do you do the delivery, whether it's contactless or not? How do you make sure that you have achieved the level of trust of the customer, it's sanitized properly or not? I think those things will become interesting. Essentially.
Yeah, but you're giving an indicative, you not exactly that entrepreneurs have to figure out, but indicative, you're saying that work from home environment is going to become important, which it was not. So anything that you're solving, which is real, tangible, then would have an opportunity. Yeah. Thank you.
I'll just add to what Priyank is saying. I would call it unbundling of Zoom. If you see a lot of previous successful business models, all marketplaces were in some sense unbundling of Craigslist of US. All kinds of SaaS companies are unbundling of what companies were doing on their Excel sheets. Today, everything is happening on Zoom. We are doing a webinar on Zoom. Somebody else is doing live education classes on Zoom. Somebody's connecting with family on Zoom. So a whole bunch of stuff is happening on Zoom, and it won't be long before we see unbundling of specific use cases that Zoom is actually creating in a very specialized manner.
Ritvik, let's discuss this offline and let's start a business which we can get all the investors to invest. Anyway,
I'll give you. Sorry, I'll give an example, right? So we were just discussing. So many webinars are going to happen.
Yeah.
Right. Every day there'll be 10, 15, 20 webinars which are going to happen, and I'm pretty sure not all startups, and there's not enough audience for all of those webinars. Right? Maybe there is a website which somebody can create an aggregation of all possible webinars for startups that are happening in one place, and so that you can choose and pick and choose, right? Virtual events, right? So many things are going to happen. So I think the ideas are there, but people have to choose.
No, very valid point. Ritvik, to you, and then so do you see that people have to look at product market fit from a different lens? And I think your portfolio, Vamsi from Vedantu, was telling me that in India now people look at product market fit, but you have to look at price product market fit. So I just want to hear from you, is there going to be some shift now because of this COVID?
No, absolutely. And by the way, Vedantu is Axel's portfolio, not mine. So it's Priyank's. But it's absolutely right. So India is not, it is a price product market fit. And I would say in current times, it's even more trickier. So if you are a startup, which is in this whole product market fit figuring out, or price product market fit figuring out stage right now, this is probably the trickiest time out there. So you had a period of 2 months where we had lockdown. So you don't know what your real demand was. You don't know what the real usage of your product was. There was no way to ascertain that. Things have suddenly opened up. Some companies, in fact, some of our very early stage companies within our own portfolio companies are seeing a sudden spike, sudden surge, which may appear like a good product market fit, but it could be just an indication of pent up demand for the last 2-3 months and may give you wrong signals. The reality is that for the next, as like how Alok was mentioning, that crisis is going to be there for the next 12, 18, or maybe 24 months. And we are going to see cycles of ups and downs. And in those short cycles of ups and downs, there may be very many negative signals which may make you believe that you either have a poor product market fit or you don't have a product market fit. So looking at superficial data, looking at cursory data may be very, very misleading. And founders will have to go 2 layers, 3 layers deep within their products, within their usage data, speaking to customers to really figure out whether the PMF is there or not there. This is the trickiest of times to figure that out. That's the only one thing I would just like to add.
Yeah, but very important point you said, that don't look at the superficial data, because data can be very, very misleading right now.
Very misleading at this point.
Yeah.
And actually, Shraddha, I want to add to Ritwik's answer. I mean, he gave one example of the pent-up demand, which can lead to a wrong conclusion on product market fit. Sometimes we as investors may also overreact to the lockdown situation. I mean, and again, I'm not trying to argue one way or the other, so please take it as a generic example. But in education, right now, all children have to be at home. And let's say you were to build a product that is playing in an ecosystem where if children are studying from home, it is aiding that process. Now, you may find a product market fit for that. But then are we to argue that physical education is fundamentally worse? So tomorrow, if the lockdown is over and children actually start going to school, will you still have a product market fit? Will you not have a product market fit? So are people using it currently because they have to and they have no other option? Or will people use it when they have another option as well? Because that difference in product market fit can also exist tomorrow.
Yeah, very true. This is very indicative. This is learning. Like whenever we are making decision or thinking about it, these are the things to think about right now. Yeah. Alok, I'm going to put you on spot. You have said in an interview to us only that and let me read it. Investors need to be comfortable with the lack of control they have over the money they invest. Now, I don't know which investor has that, but you have said this. And right now, investors would be feeling that very dearly. Is there something that investors need to relearn or keep in mind during this time? So and Shraddha, now the statement, now what you're going to be saying, he will flash it everywhere.
Yeah, one thing I've learned I have to be very careful whatever I say to you.
No.
So, anything I say can be used against me in future. So point taken. But so Shraddha, let me just give the context. And actually, I think nothing has changed for me on that front. As investors, we are investing behind a market and a team in that market and taking minority stakes. We are not the ones who run those companies. Our job is to be sounding boards to these founders. Sometimes hopefully help them avoid mistakes if they can be avoided. Sometimes connect them to people that may help them in growing their company or again avoiding mistakes that they should be avoiding. But in the end, we are not there to run those companies. In fact, the reason if we knew how to run those companies ourselves, then I think we should be building companies ourselves. There's a reason why we are investors and somebody else is an entrepreneur, actually. And so we fundamentally need to be comfortable with the lack of control, therefore, that we have. In the end, it is the entrepreneur who's going to run the company. I do, by the way, see the point, if that's what you're trying to say, that in crisis like this, we all feel very jittery, right? And in fact, it's almost like it's probably the worst situation because we are worried about the situation and we can't even control it, actually, ourselves. We can give some advice, but to be honest, number one, we don't have a choice. And number two, I don't think even if you wanted to do anything, it's going to help in any form. I think our job, as I said, is again to play that partner, to give that sense. In fact, the one thing we can do is to reinforce the belief behind the founders at such time. more than what we did even 4 months back.
Yeah.
Just because sales has fallen through in April doesn't mean that founder has suddenly become bad or the market has suddenly become bad. I think actually in many ways, this is the time to show the confidence behind the founders.
Yeah. Wow. This makes me and all entrepreneurs, it makes us emotional. This is what we want to hear. This is very powerful. Yeah. And somehow I feel when you say it that you mean it. So that
I
is
do.
more. Yeah.
But please don't use my statement against me, Shraddha.
No, this I'm with you. Because all investors need to say this and all entrepreneurs need to hear this. Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
But sorry to be, spoiled sport here, but I think I have seen entrepreneurs. So I have seen three types of entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs who are worried about the crisis, entrepreneurs who are not worried about the crisis because they have money, and then third, entrepreneurs who are ignoring the crisis. Like, I don't care. Like, कुछ होगा नहीं. Like, it's okay.
ऐसे नहीं होंगे.
Ignoring in the sense that they obviously say something, but their actions don't speak.
Okay.
Right? So, and I think the big thing, as an investor on the board, the only thing I can advise them is कि boss, एक बार पैसा चला गया from your bank account, but that is not coming back, right? So it is better to plan conservative right now. Better to plan कि yes, I might not. If I have 9 months of money, I might finish it off in 6 months, only for this crisis. And then you look at it every month. If you projected कि you will earn 1 lakh rupees and you ended up earning 2 lakh rupees in that month, you're better than projections, right? So there will come a scenario where you can go back and then start spending money and then start growing. But if you projected that I'll get 2 lakh rupees as revenue and I got only 1 lakh, your money is already gone, right? So you've overspent that money. I think it's just that. It's like managing your house budget, right? So it's just about that. So it's better to be slightly more, conservative, not pessimist, but conservative right now. And say, hey, I need to, that's the only advice I give to my founders. When I see them, they say, I have enough money and, all of that. I say, boss, you just be conservative. What's the harm in being conservative?
Yeah. No, I think we are all as an ecosystem learning conservatism and frugality.
Yeah, that's true.
Behavior, old-fashioned way of running business. Yeah.
So investors have learned to ask, what is your contribution margin? That question, instead of what is your growth?
Yes. To you, Priyank, now that you're talking about this, there is today, it's very difficult to forecast your revenues. Absolutely, you can't. And I don't know if you all are getting some kind of an AOP because it was April month and I couldn't make an AOP for one because you just don't know, like, what numbers should you put. So I just want to ask, when there is no long-term and even short-term visibility to revenues, what advice to entrepreneurs in the enterprise space or to entrepreneurs you would like to give? How should they go about thinking about, their planning, their revenue?
See, I think this is the time AOP making or planning is very important.
Okay.
Right. And the reason for that is simply, if you don't have a plan, you don't even know how much you're deviating from the plan, either positive or negative. So plan to banana chahiye. Right. So, if you, and I'll give you an example, right? So as a founder, forget investors, right? As a founder, you have a duty to your employees. If 100 people are working for you and you had assumed that you will give them, you have enough money in the bank to give them employment for the next, let's say 1 year or 2 years. Now your plan falls short and you, for some reason, you only have 3 months of revenue left or 3 months of money left and you don't have any visibility into revenue. Then by not making that plan and not tracking whether you are getting enough revenue or not, you're doing injustice first to your employees, because our customers to hai nahi, right? So you're actually doing injustice to your employees, right? So it is better, and to be honest, like I've had conversations with my founders where we have discussions: should we cut 30% salary across the board for all employees, or should we cut 30% of workforce? And it's a very tough call. There is no good answer for that question. And that's why I think it's important that planning be done. I mean, some of our companies, they have actually raised a lot of capital. They have done, up to 6-7 different scenarios they have made during different levers, that if what happens if, this happens, what happens, for example, what happens that, let's say 20% of my revenue comes from Maharashtra and Maharashtra will open only 4 months later. Whereas Maharashtra opens up in 1 month. It just brings a significantly different kind of revenue stream. So I think it is super important that you plan your revenue. At least make a what was business as usual, what was my last year projections of when I had made in March, and then now obviously COVID has hit, so how do I tone it down, and then really bad scenario, what happens, so that at least you know ki pani kahan tak hai.
Yeah, no, very good advice. It's just that it's so scary to plan right now. But yeah, what you're saying, even if it's difficult, go ahead and at least put something out there to think. Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, Shraddha, I wanted to add to what Priyank said. I think the one difference in the AOPs today versus the AOPs we would make in normal times is that in general, in times of uncertainty, you do scenario planning. So it is not just to say that, look, this is my next 12-month plan and this is going to be my monthly revenue and monthly cost. I think like Priyank was articulating, Maharashtra may open in 1 month, Maharashtra may open in 4 months. So there you have two scenarios, right? So this is a time to actually do a lot of scenario planning in your AOP that you may not have done in the past because you don't know as much the outcome of these variables.
Yeah.
And unlike before, where typically, let's say a company makes a January to December plan, and you as a board and the founders with his or her VPs is measuring on that AOP, now actually you may need to revise your plan maybe every 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Right? If you are a SaaS company, you currently may be closing deals which were created in the pipe maybe in January, which was a different era altogether. You are going to look at what's your new top of the funnel conversion from leads to sales qualified leads, sales qualified leads to a demo to a proposal to a sale, right? So you are looking for continuously new data. You might actually be finding that your CAC has actually gone down because earlier when you were doing search engine marketing, the CAC was actually higher. And today those rates have actually come down. So CAC has come down as well. So math that used to make sense earlier, it may be different math today. So you need to be in that sense, be a lot more flexible in your AOP. But like Priyank said, it is not an excuse to not make the AOP. You have to still make the AOP, build the scenarios around it, but be more swift and nimble in navigating with that AOP today.
Yeah. I feel that all of you are telling me also to make the Yeah, no, but there's no excuse. Yes, a very important suggestion: scenario plannings and keeping everyone aware of these other scenarios. These could be the possible situations. Yeah. Ritwik, to you, you have been, if I may say so, an e-commerce stalwart, a startup CEO yourself. What are some of the learnings, on ground, real learnings? I know how deeply you feel the pain of an entrepreneur, if I may say so, go on record. Your wife has been an entrepreneur and she has run a content business herself. She's bootstrapped it. You have been a startup CEO, so you understand. And what I like about you is that you don't see it from others' lens. It feels like you are seeing it for the entrepreneurs. So tell us, what are some of the things you would like to say? Because when I talk to entrepreneurs right now, there is definitely a sense of despair. There is a lot of stress. What will you say?
No, there's no denial of the uncertainty looming on every founder's head and the anxiety that it creates. It creates, there is all kinds of anxiety as to, what is going to happen to my business? What is going to happen to my employees? What is going to happen to, my investors and the various stakeholders? If my business does not work out, what will I do after that? Thousands of questions which keep, which are on top of people's heads at this point in time. And unfortunately, there are no right answers to any of these questions. So the only thing that the founder has to do or can do is that in this periods of uncertainty, identify 2-3 of things which are within their control. What is in their control? Their expenses are in their control. Their communication as to how they communicate with their employees, how they treat their employees is within their control. How they treat their customers and how do they deal with them is within their control. So they have to be really, really stay focused on issues which are in your control. And of course, you have to keep, assessing the situation every 6 weeks, like how Alok was saying, and readjust. But the moment you start thinking about issues which are beyond your control, there is no end to it. So this is the time where you have to look inwards and identify these 3 things. Who are my employees? How are they feeling? What is my employee going through? How can I make my employer more comfortable? Who are my customers? What are my customers going through? Can I empathize with my customers? These are the things which are in your control. What is my cash balance right now? How much expenses do I have? How do I need to control that? So if you stay focused on those things, your sense, your purpose, all of that comes back to you. The moment you start focusing on issues which are not in your control, as to what's going to happen to Maharashtra 1 month or 4 months, you don't know, and that creates anxiety. That creates a lot of despair. So my suggestion is to, yes, you do all your planning, you go through the scenario planning, but on a day-to-day basis, you have to stay focused inwards in things which are in your control. Don't stress about things which are not in your control, because everybody else is in the same boat.
Yeah. Thank you. Very useful. Yeah. Alok, I want to ask you also this. You have donned various hats. You've been, coder, teacher, consultant, now investor. You've been in various roles. You've seen, like I asked you in the first question, various crises. Now, if you had to tell, and there's no prescriptive way, but still you have lived it, and that's why if you had to tell one thing, if you look back and say that, okay, this is how you could navigate crisis, like what we call crisis management.
As you were asking the question, Shraddha, the first word coming to my mind was khana badosh, which means a wanderer or a Brownian motion in the career. I was thinking coder, teacher, consultant, investor. What the hell have I been doing actually? But Shraddha, I would say that, look, number one, believe in yourself, and two, don't play to the gallery in times of crisis. When I say believe in yourself, I think this is that we all can overreact. We can all feel very desperate in these situations, but this is the time to remind yourself why you started the business you started in the first place. Why were you so passionate about the problem you wanted to solve? Speak to yourself, speak to your leadership team, speak to your employees, speak to your customers. And I think it's important to remind everyone why you started this journey in the first place. Number two, it is not the time to play to the gallery. It is not the time to be popular. I come across CEOs who say, oh, we are not going to fire anyone because we live and die in this together. We are all going to take 50% salary cuts, etc. I think some of those are populist statements to make. At the end of the day, it is your job to take the decisions that you need to take to make sure that you are around by the time the crisis is over. And that will mean that you will end up taking decisions which are not popular. So this is, I think, the often used cliche that peacetime CEO versus wartime CEO. This is indeed the time to be wartime CEO and not worry about popularity. If you have to do a surgery, do a surgery. And if that means you have to do a deep cut, if that's what it takes. But don't try to be popular. This is not the time to do that. So at least that would be my advice to people.
Yeah, no, you have addressed a very important thing. So I just wanted to tell all of you that today I was just reading some messages I got from very big corporate leaders, actually 3 messages that they were saying that, there's this bloodbath happening in the startup ecosystems and you should hold accountable all these founders who are laying off. They get so much of visibility and now they are letting people go without thinking. And, there is no right answer, right? There is no right answer to this. Do you survive or be in the business, or do you keep people? Like I want to ask, like, all of you, like, what is this answer? And this is for everyone who's been laid off, who will be laid off, for the founders. What is the answer here?
Let me go at it. As what Alok said, it's unpopular, but the reality is that the business of any business is to stay in business. Right.
Well said.
And if any startup or a company or a business has to stay in business, sometimes harsh decisions have to be taken. Sometimes those decisions are unpleasant. I have taken some decisions myself in the past, and they are hard. They are very unpleasant. It gives you sleepless nights. But at the end of the day, I think keeping your company alive is extremely important, and only if you can keep it alive, you can realize your dreams and aspirations at some point in time. If the company is not around, then every dream, every aspiration also dies with it. So it's those harsh decisions. They are unpopular. They may seem unfair, but they sometimes need to be taken, because company may have taken decisions 6 months back on hiring people based on a plan. which looked very different from what it is today.
Yeah.
Today, as what Frank was saying, there's so many companies whose revenues are down to zero. And when your revenues are down to zero, there's no way you can support a cost structure and stay alive also.
Yeah.
So you have to take those decisions. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's time where we have to implement all these things that we have read in books, like hard things about hard things and all that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No,
That
but
book
what I'm thinking is not what Alok you said. It's very tough, no, for founders to, because naturally you take ownership and what you are saying is that be okay to be unpopular and at some point not be the most liked person in the room,
Yeah.
as long as you are being in the business and keeping your business running.
I think you had Ashish from Book My Show on the show, right? And I mean, I look at him and I think people in his company have been with him for like 17 years, 18 years. And at one point, he tells a story in Axel where he had 250 employees, and then the GFC in 2009 hit, and they went from 250 employees to I think 40 employees, and now they are a unicorn, right? And now this is now their second large crisis, and I think it's about surviving that time to become a unicorn. If they had at that point of time not taken those calls, they would not be here today.
Yeah.
And now they will. I believe that they will see through this particular crisis as well, right? So I think it's the same thing. I mean, unless you plan out, you have to take hard calls. Nothing like hard thing about hard things. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to ask all three of you again. I'm alluding to the report that we all of us saw. I saw it in TechCrunch. I saw it everywhere on Twitter. Is that 70% of Indian startups will be out of business, where they will shut down. They have 3 months run rate, which is very alarming, very disturbing. Of course, one can, optimist like me will question it, but realist will say maybe that's true. And the survey would be based on survey and talking to companies. I just want to ask all of you, we are all part of this India startup story. And what do you think needs to be done as an ecosystem, as startups, as investors, as people who are shaping this? What do you think should be done to help the startups right now?
So, Shraddha, number one, first of all, I would say that if you look at early stage startups in general, whether there is COVID or there is no COVID, I think mortality rate of early stage startups is high. And that is par for the course. That's just because of stage related risk.
Yeah.
And if I may add, assuming most of these startups are tech startups, tech is a higher risk asset than other forms of companies that people start with. So there will be some natural mortality that comes, which is par for the course. Clearly, in times of COVID, these situations do get heightened.
Yeah.
What can we do to help? I do think that being responsible board members, at least on part of the VCs, is important in these situations. One does expect that they have seen some of these situations or have visibility to, of course, more than one pattern, because they're seeing across a portfolio and not just reacting to an individual, because a founder, unfortunately, is limited to one company that they're part of.
Yeah.
So it is our jobs to, in some sense, like I talked about earlier, being calm and thoughtful. I think it is our job to, in a way, create the opportunity for being more calm and not actually add to the chaos and confusion in these situations. Number two is that I think being creative. I mean, I know a bunch of companies that are trying to be very creative about debt funding, other forms of tuck-in funding. And again, an individual founder may not have access to many of these things. But I think, again, we owe it to our companies to be creative and finding those solutions, whether it's venture debt, whether it's other forms of sovereign debt, which is being created right now. I do think that government has taken a bunch of steps as well. In particular, if you look at some of the moratorium, etc., that the government has announced, and I understand that there are two sides of coin to every coin, and because you're benefiting someone, you're actually hurting someone else also in that process. But I do believe that some of those measures have given a little bit of lease of life. I know, for example, some other creative solutions that have come out. I think Indifi came out with a debt solution for SaaS startups, which again was very creative. So I think we are finding that people are actually thinking on their feet and trying to figure out as to what can be done to make sure that good startups are actually around, because these are businesses that actually truly do make sense. That being said, I think life will be hard. There will be some companies which I believe should be around but will not be around by the time we see the end of this crisis.
Wow.
I think Shraddha, just to add to what Alok is saying, I think as a founder, the first thing you should do is you should find a trusted advisor. You know, so who can give you whose advice you can, in a way, who you can lean on. You know, I mean, there are a lot of, I don't know, what's the right word? So basically, maybe another entrepreneur who has seen some of these crises. You know, who can say, hey, who can help you to stay calm. I was advising one of my friends who's the CEO of a company, and he was like, you know, my board members are telling me to cut costs, but I believe if I cut costs right now, then I will not be able to hire in the future, and I'll get defeated. And I'm like, and I see this all the time, right? So no entrepreneur wants to let go of people to save money, because either he believes the business is not going to get hit, or he believes it will be very hard. He will lose talent to a competition, and it will be very hard to come back in the future. And whereas
sometimes you are connected to the people, right? Sometimes it just becomes emotionally also hard to let go of people. Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the last one point which you made, when you're emotionally connected, you know, the problem there is, you know, if you try to save everybody and nobody gets saved in the end, you've basically done a disservice to everyone.
Yeah.
I think that is where you have to be slightly dispassionate about it and say, hey, you know, I can't save the boat is sinking. I can't save everybody. So what do I do? You know, you have to let some people go.
Yeah.
But the other two cases where, you know, you have this conundrum ki, acha, you know, mera revenue hit nahi ho raha, so why is my board member telling me to save? Or, you know, if I let go people right now, it'll be very hard for me to come back in the future. And it was a good scenario where, you know, you have enough money to probably last you a year. I go back to the same premise. I am not an expert at predicting how large this crisis will grow. Nobody is. You know, and if you look at the India numbers, like, so the numbers are still rising. We haven't hopefully we have slowed the curve, but we have not flattened the curve yet.
Yeah.
And that is scary for me. And so nobody knows. And if nobody knows, you know, the thing you can do is what is the end goal? Is to survive. So how do I survive through this? But yes, you don't want to survive in a form that you didn't shut down the company, only the founder remained in the company. That should not be the case. Right? So it has to have some businesses going on, and how do you make sure that the business continues to grow? So this is a hard time. You have to keep on finding, you know, all the jugards you can to get revenue in somehow or the other. Right? Finding same customers, more money, new products, or getting into a new business. You know, that's all. You'll have to learn new tricks.
Yeah. Ritvik, are you saying something, or should I ask another question?
No, you can ask another question. I think both Alok and Priyank added a lot.
You know, now I'm feeling a little depressed with this conversation, so I'm going to ask a question. Is that, you know, so I spoke to, I think I don't know if you guys saw, because I spoke to Manish Sabharwal of Team Lease, and he's also on the board of RBI. So while, of course, he was being very conservative about what it is going to be and how it is going to be, but, you know, he said that one thing that nobody can take from us is that today, world over, India remains the last frontier of the largest consumer, human, young age economy. And that cannot be taken away. It will be slow, it will be hard, it will be difficult, but that is something that nobody in the world can deny. And especially with China now, and China, of course, seeing that growth curve, and which we haven't seen. So I want to understand from all of you, while it is going to be hard, it is difficult. Two things I want to ask all of you, and individually I want this answer, if you can give, is that one thing, as you all, because you all have been in trenches, you all have been in professional, what is keeping you excited about, in spite of all the challenges, what is keeping you excited about this thing, about the India, about the entrepreneurship, about startups? And second thing is that very personal, from your own journeys, all of you have had a very, you know, it's a self-made journey. you have survived different ups and downs. I again want you to open up and tell something that has worked for you, which we all can take back today and say, okay, they did it and they survived it, or they learned from it, or they stumbled and fell and they did this, and we want to keep this at the back of our mind. So what, so those two things, if you can answer for us.
Okay, let me go first on your first question, which is the second one is the harder question, but the first one is, see, as VCs, we are in this profession because we are eternal optimists. Right?
Yeah.
We are optimists. We have trained ourselves to take optimistic decisions on extremely uncertain scenarios and uncertain data, right? So when you say that an optimist looks at a glass half empty, half full, he looks at it half full. But when a startup comes to us, most of the time glass is not even half full, right? It's like there's like chullu bhar pani type literally in that startup, and we see the glass full over there, right? So that's what we've trained ourselves to be, and that is what keeps all of us going. Yes, there is a crisis. Yes, there is a issue that we need to deal with, and we'll overcome it at some point in time. All of us will overcome. We have to pass through it. We have to survive it. But the long-term prospects, I don't think, and just like how you said, what Manish said, it does not change. Nothing has changed for India's long-term prospects between what was there in January versus what is there now. It all remains the same. We've had a temporary setback. We've had a temporary slowdown, but that's okay. That's life, right? So you move on with it. And so at least I personally continue to stay optimistic around that.
Yeah. Thank you. So about on the second question, I'm just giving you an indication of one of the answers which I got was this, PVR founder, Ajay Bijli. He said, I asked him, how are you dealing? Because for them, it's zero revenue. Nobody's going to cinema hall. And he was laughing because it was so tough that for 2 months you're not seeing. And he said, we'll be the last one to open. Even if the lockdown is over, cinema halls and what it will mean is different. Like it's a completely new world. And I said, how are you facing this? Like 2 months, zero revenue from being the PVR and having a good listing and all that. And he said that, in his life, he said he lost his father early. And I'm just saying for everyone's benefit, this is that he lost his father. And he said that, that loss was so deep and so personal because it could never be revoked. It could never, but it gave him the strength because now he looks at anything and so zyada se zyada kya hoga? Like what's the worst that can happen? Aaj nahi, 3 mahine baad, 6 mahine baad, we will jaan hai, so we'll figure out. And we will come out and we and he said, I have smart minds, people will make, jab tak zinda hai, we'll figure this out. And I thought that was a very powerful thing to say, and especially because he's suffering the most right now.
Yeah. My 2 cents on that is that I have realized whenever there's a hard time, the only thing you can do is reinvent. Right? When the 2008 crisis happened, at that time I said, hey, looks like things are not going as planned. What should I do? So I went and did a MBA. 2014 is the time I was not doing professionally very well. I was under a lot of stress. And that's the time of reinvention. I said, why am I under stress? Why am I taking too much stress? Is it my performance is bad? I don't feel confidence myself. What is it that is? So I let go of all those worries essentially. What I believe, as long as I believe in myself, if the world is not believing in myself, I don't care, right? So the moment I stop believing in myself, then the battle is lost, right? And now today, if you ask me what I'm like, for me, again, this is like, I'm sitting at home, I'm trying to make the best of this. I'm trying to lose weight. I know I look like Bhagalpur ka Kerry, but, I am like, how do I make myself fit? So this is the time, what I say personally, to do CapEx. I keep telling people in my firm, my juniors and equally, like, this is the time to do CapEx which yields long-term benefits. It is a lot of hard work right now, but like do a lot of reading, improve your thought process, improve your health, this is a wonderful opportunity to spend time with my kids. Like I've never spent so much time with them. Like I used to see them at 9 o'clock in the night. One of the kid would have gone to sleep, other kid was going to sleep. So I think we should be thankful of what we have.
Yeah.
And I think this is not, yes, it is a time of worry, but if you start looking at the positive side of things, and use that, one, so don't lose hope. But two, more importantly, what are you reinventing yourself? Because what has happened today, COVID is not a one-off. I guarantee you, in the next 10 years, we will have one more large crisis which will come. Right? And if you have that as in your mind and say कि अच्छा अभी अगले मैंने इस बार में क्या सीखा है जिससे कि next time ये problem के लिए I'm ready. In fact, I worry कि maybe that problem, another COVID kind of situation will happen 5 years down the line. Right? So what is it that you're doing? I think it's just about asking that question and trying to internalize it.
Yeah, reinventing at this time. Yeah. Thank you. Very valuable advice.
Shraddha, okay, sorry. I'll go ahead and then I'll come to my personal story after that.
Somewhat similar, but somewhat different also. But I do think that this notion of believing in yourself and staying true to your core, we all have a different core. Like Rutik said, he's an optimist. I'm assuming most people on the call today, they are actually even more optimistic than VCs are. They take a leap of faith in their head and jump into cold water without even knowing what the depth is, without even knowing whether they know how to swim or not. That's the DNA of most people who are the audience today. And while we all try to change ourselves because of these situations, I think it's important not to change the core of what we are. We are who we are because that's the way we work and that's the way we behave. And of course, we need to adapt to these situations. But I hope that our core doesn't change in these situations too. Again, I'll give my story as well in a nutshell. I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, took 1 or 2 different stabs. And ultimately 10 years of post my undergrad, I went bankrupt. So I graduated in 92. By the end of 2002, I was in debt with zero money. And me and my wife together actually. And we didn't know how we landed in that spot. And that's because between the two of us, we had 3 entrepreneurial stints by that point in time. And of course, we changed our course post that. We said that, look, we can't be in a situation where we have to ask our parents for money all over again at that age. And we said that just having a certain level of cash balance is important in life. But we realized that as we sort of quote unquote began to be a little bit comfortable, we were back to who we were. I think our DNA is to take risk. Yeah. We just can't survive without it too. And again, we won't be ourselves. We won't enjoy being with ourselves if we are not true to ourselves. So I hope that, I'm sure in this crisis, it will turn out to be bad for a few. It will turn out to be good for a few. But I hope they don't fundamentally change as people because of that.
Wow. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Great story, Alok. Great story.
Yeah.
Shraddha, let me add a personal experience since you asked a question about something which went very personal. So, back in 2010, I was an entrepreneur. I started a company. It was an e-commerce company. It was those early days of e-commerce when Flipkart was also a young startup, Snapdeal was a young startup, etc. Lots of promise ahead. And if things had panned out, maybe even I would have been a billionaire or whatever maybe. But unfortunately, it didn't pan. Right? Things didn't work out. And by end of 2011, early 2012, we had to shut down the company. We had to fire people. We had to lay off everybody. We returned zero money to our investors. So our investors lost our money. The company failed. Entrepreneurs, all the employees had to be laid off. And it was a pretty tragic moment at that point in time to have to go through that. And especially when the prospects were looking very, very bright for e-commerce over there. But when I look back at it right now, it was a journey. I learned a lot from the journey. I grew up through that journey and found an alternative profession, which has turned out to be fairly successful and lucrative for me. When I look at all the other employees who were there along with me, pretty much all of them have done well. Somebody was a CPO of another well-funded company. The other guy is a VP engineering at another well-funded company, and so on and so forth. And when I look at all of this, what I realize is that, yes, the company failed. The business did not do well. But I, as an entrepreneur, did not fail. My employees did not fail. All of us learned through it, and I've actually thrived and done much better in life beyond post that. So I think that's what I would tell everybody, that there's a scenario, there are a lot of externalities, which and if something bad happens, company doesn't work, doesn't mean that you have failed. You just have to take the learnings from that and move on, and you'll actually thrive.
You know what all of you are saying is giving me goosebumps, because this is like at this moment of stress, these stories are so powerful. And thank you so much, because I know, like, people who are listening to this and people who will be seeing this video, this is what we want to take, because what you have, by just opening and sharing this, because the thing is, I want to, and I wanted to address this, and both you and Alok, what you said is that, you might make, you might do things which might, in the worldly eyes, might not be considered as the checklist of great success, but you are not failing, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you're staying true to your core, and if you're really, really living it properly, then you're not failing. And that's what we all want to hear, because right now, the biggest fear everyone has, कि क्या अगर बंद हो गया, क्या अगर नहीं चला, क्या अगर रेवेन्यू नहीं आया, क्या जब लग गई तो लोग क्या कहेंगे भी.
Life doesn't end. Life doesn't
Yeah.
end. That's the thing.
Yeah, no, but thank you. And Priyank, that you said reinvent, because it's hard. It's easy to say, but it's so hard to change daily habits, daily practices, especially in lockdown, when you are getting frustrated and you have everyone at home. Like, for me, I just can't even imagine if I had so many people at home, I'll go mad. But anyway.
You will make them mad.
Also, I'm in the office because I'm making use of the 30% office opening in Bangalore. But we have had, I think, one of the most meaningful deep dive session that we've seen. And to all of you, we've done more than 108 webinars in this long.
Wow.
Like,
Wow,
108.
that's amazing.
It's crazy. And
Talk about reinventing here then.
Yes.
yeah, and then people are coming, listening, giving us feedback. But I personally, for me, and I'm sure everyone who's watched this and everyone who will watch this, this is a very, very powerful and deep learning session. Thank you for generously sharing your time. Thank you.
Thanks
you,
for having
Shraddha.
us here.
Thanks. Yeah.
And thanks,
I
Ritvik and
promise that
Priyank.
you guys will come again, and I'll call again.
As long as you don't replay what I said in the past to me again.
If one, I will. Thank you.
All right, thank you,
so
Shraddha.
much on behalf of all of us and everyone. People have stayed there for 1.5 hours. Thank you. Thanks so
Thank you.
much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye. Best of luck, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.